Hi, my name is Mary-Katherine.
And I'm Ezra Plyman.
This is our presentation on U.S. history star data analysis.
So we noticed that to get started with overall performance of students, there was about 31,000 students analyzed for this. And we noticed that first-time testers tended to perform significantly better than retesters, which was our key takeaway was that first-time testers tended to be more fresh on the knowledge and pass better or have higher passing rates than retesters.
So the overall performance of students, we realized that best, um, the best category was government and citizenship. This is what students tested well on with 62% passing, or mastering. And we hypothesized that the reason that they passed this was the concrete and memorable logic, these key words and phrases that they're able to remember and their personal relevance. You look at the question, lowering the military age to 18 is something that's deeply personal with these kids because, they're around that age. Also, this has been repeated to them for years as they started learning about this in 8th grade, and now they're in 10th grade and they're taking this test on it. Also, they have these clear words that trigger remembering, so like World War II or Vietnam or draft, and it directly to the 26th Amendment, which they've been learning about.
So for the first major weakness we noticed was in geography and culture. And students really tended to struggle with distinguishing factor types, specifically between human-made and physical or natural events, like like associating mudslide with being human caused, despite the fact that it's a physical occurrence. There was also a lack of mental mapping, so students struggled to like picture and recall where things were in their relation to each other. And they also really struggled with two-step thinking, where they're shown one visual analysis and then having to apply their or recall their historic knowledge to that item. So they really struggled with this two-step thinking.
The way one of the strategies that we came up with was anchor charts. We've talked about those in class before, and allowing these students to have visual cues and also these different phrases that help them have that recall. So prolonged drought would be nature, and deep plowing would be human, and allowing these students to kind of really make these anchor charts themselves and allowing them to have that interaction with us in as a class to make them and have them visually put up so that they can have that visual every day to remember.
Our second strategy was before and after maps. So students would be learning about a specific physical or geographic occurrence, and we would have an initial map which shows the location before anything happened. Then we'd have the second map which would show the challenge or the problem arising, and then a third map showing the solution that was created, the human modification applied to this. And this three steps, these visual cues really help students to process and recall the information later when they have that visual connection to the material.
So a formative assessment we came up with this would be the index cards that are have two separate colors. So we give a example. So the building of railroads, which would be orange, which would be human made, and it will allow students to flip. So we can get a gauge of what they understand as human or naturally made. So we can look out and see things that we need to immediately address.
Our second assessment we came up with, or formative assessment we came up with, was two color map annotations. So students be provided with a specific map in front of them, like the building of the Panama Canal, and the students would have to use different color coordinate highlighters, so like blue for physical environment and yellow for human modifications, and connect them via their colored highlighter. And to check for understanding, we'd kind of walk around the room, and if we see that a student is highlighting something incorrectly, like mudslides being human, instead of giving the answer or telling them they're wrong, we'd ask them questions like, "Hey, did humans cause the mudslides?" Things like that to get them to reach those connections on their own rather than being told the answer.
For a summative assessment, obviously, we want it to be a bit harder, and we want to make sure that these students really have this down. So we're going to provide a photograph of miners climbing the pass and a map of the Yukon Territory, and we want them to analyze the factors of these images and the maps and have them identify the physical geographical factors and the human actions that these miners took to do what they were doing. We want to make sure that they understand the separation of human and physical and really get that down.
For the second major weakness we noticed was in history, specifically around like 1877 to the present time. The students really struggled with overlapped terms and more blurry areas that are hard to distinguish, like the Gilded Age and the Progressive Era, which were very similar in a lot of the stuff that was happening and did kind of overlap, and students really struggled with that. They also struggled with abstract labels. Take something like the Gilded Age. If they don't know the Mark Twain definition that kind of that its name derives from, that label means nothing. So if they don't have any of that like knowledge to recall, it doesn't mean anything to them. So it's harder to remember. Whereas you have something like World War One and World War Two, which are very self-explanatory and easy to recall. There was also a lack of specific anchors. Mainly, there was a lot of dates, and dates alone can be very hard to memorize and harder to recall what happened with each correlating date. So students really lacked those like specific anchors. Um, and they also tended to mix up cause and effect between movements, events, laws, passes, changes, things like that. They would confuse what happened first or what was a result to who. So they really tended to get confused on that cause and effect.
So for another strategy, it was kind of similar to our first one, but it's allowing these anchor charts, but this is also allowing giving them brands, something that these kids really associate with, like Coke or Pepsi, and allowing them to come up with like logo phrases like shiny outside, rotten inside, something that allows that memorization and that recall when they're taking these tests. So you have the age and then what associated with it so that they can have that memorization and then also putting it up in the room so they have that visual so that they can remember.
Our second strategy was solution chain links. Connecting cause and effects between different events, like monopolies led to antitrust laws, or unsafe meat led to the Pure Food and Drug Act. These repeated color coordinated chain links really help to build that recall with students, the progression of events, and having them be color coordinated helps them distinguish it in their brain.
For another formative assessment, this is very similar to the other one, but this is a great formative assessment that allows us teachers to immediately understand what these
Mhm.
students are understanding and what they're not understanding. So you have these two cards on a stick that they can flip back and forth, very similar to the index card, but it has the Gilded Age and the Progressive Age with the little pictures that we came up with in our lesson, and allows them to identify the historical events with the time period. So you call out Pure Food and Drug Act, and you want to make sure that all of the students came up with the Gilded Age. And if they didn't, we need to go and review and make sure that they completely understand the time periods.
Another formative assessment we came up with was a broken timeline analysis. For this, we'll have a timeline projected on the board or handed out in like a sheet to the class. And but one of the specific events on the timeline will have a fallacy, be incorrect, and the activity will ask students to identify the time traveler or what is in the wrong spot or what's been misdone, so that we know that they have that prior knowledge of the succinct order of events and are able to recall and connect those.
For our summative assessment on this, we also kind of had a very similar assessment to the last one, but it's analyzing a photo. So take the Prohibition Act for an example. You have a Prohibition Act picture. They have to identify the historical era. They have to see the picture and be able to identify it from the picture and then explain the law or reform, so the Prohibition Act. And we need to make sure that these things are correct and that they mastered them.
Mm-hmm. So, for the final reflection we came up with for the data and instruction, it taught us that data really is the bridge between what I think I taught and what the students actually learned. Teachers often rely on intuition or the feeling that a lesson went well. However, the data analysis showed that intuition is not enough. For example, in the US History Project, it would have been easy to assume students understood the Dust Bowl because they nodded during the lecture, and but the data revealed that a specific hidden misconception that they couldn't distinguish between human and physical causes. So the real key lesson and takeaway was the data removes the guesswork from this. It transforms instruction from a one size fits all presentation into a surgical tool that allows us to identify specific broken links in students' understanding rather than just re explaining a whole chapter.
Um, we really struggled with this because we're both theater
Mm-hmm.
K through 12 majors, and we don't really use data in our lesson planning. But we really realized that data really allows us to go through things that we need to teach our students. So using a rubric as a data set would be a way to use this. So say we assign a monologue and these students are not doing vocal projection very well and they 70% of the class scores low on vocal projection. That to us signals that we need to do a unit on vocal projection in monologues and in all the rest of theater, rather like in scenes or in shows.
We can also use formative checks in rehearsals. Uh, so using a green card or hand card check for history, we could use nonverbal checks in rehearsal. Example: close your eyes or raise your hand if you know the blocking for scene two. If only three hands go up, that is an immediate data that we know that we can run the scene, but we just have to go through the blocking first.
We also want to target kind of shyer students or students that we notice are struggling. So we want to have that data to kind of differentiate and like build confidence because confidence is key in theater and they
Mm-hmm.
have to be confident in what they learn to be able to go and perform.
And then lastly, we really learn to rely on objective theater or objective feedback. Theater is something that can so often feel very objective, but using data driven concepts allow us to give objective feedback, um, like tally the number of times that they turn their back to the audience. This objective feedback will help them really retain what they're being taught rather than the subjective nature that theater so often seems to have.
And we came up with the sentence when data talks, instruction stops guessing and starts guiding. And as cheesy as it is, we really we are theater people at the end of the day, and we really don't use data as theater teachers, but now we've really seen that we can kind of make our own data through
Mm-hmm.
our projects and assignments and really use that to guide our lessons. Thank you so much. Again, I'm Mary Catherine Mulligan.
And I'm Ezra Plyman.
Thank you so much for
Thank
listening
you.
to our